before you go to YouTube?
Um,
Tell me when to hit mute and I will.
you all hit mute. Just hit mute unless you want to say something to Chris or make a comment, but just keep it muted until then. And we should be live now. Alicia, can you let us know?
Yes. I said, no. Yes, it's live. I see it too.
All right, Chris, you're on.
Okay. Hey y'all. Um, well, I wanted to start off with worship, of course, and a little upbeat, and then I'll just slow it down. But we're gonna do "Lord, You Are Good" by Israel, and then pray, and then get right into the Bible study. Okay? You guys can thumbs up me if you hear me. Great. All right. Um, Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. People from every nation and tongue, from generation to generation, we worship you. Hallelujah, hallelujah, we worship you for who you are. We can do that one more time. Come on, say we worship you. We worship you. Hallelujah, hallelujah, we worship you for who you are. You guys just say you are good. Say you are good. And I just want to slow it down. Because we worship you. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We worship you for who you are. Because you are good. That's it. So let's pray in, and then let's lead into the Bible study. Um, well, God, as always, we just say thank you so very much for this moment, to glorify your name, for this moment to really just make your name great. God, we ask right now that you soften the hearts and minds of each and every individual that is listening right now, that you soften the hearts and mind of me, the vessel that you have chosen for this special moment, and that you just allow for my mouth to speak what your heart is full of, oh God. God, we ask right now that everyone that is in need of a word from you, that they may be touched and that their spirits may be edified. It's in Jesus' name we pray. We say amen. All right. So, um, you guys can still hear me? All right. Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Exodus chapter 32, verses 1 through 8. The title of this Bible study is Exploring How Fear Can Create False Worship. And I want to start by reading the verses to you all. The golden calf. Verse 32 starts off and it says, When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, Come make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. Aaron answered them, Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me. So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord with a capital L. So the next day, the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterward, they sat down to eat and drink, and they got up to indulge in revelry, which is basically like Mardi Gras. They just had a party, all. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, 'These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.'" And that is how the scripture reads. Before diving into the notes and the points, I just wanted to start off with defining fear. Both, by the way, Webster defines it in, I love to go to Greek, y'all. So, about the Greek term of it as well. It says, an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. Phobos means panic, flight, fear, the causing of fear or terror, right? So again, we're going to be talking about, we're really not talking, but exploring how in this particular text, fear can create a sense of false worship. And with all that we have going on, just the importance of acknowledging the emotion of fear, but more importantly, acknowledging the power of worship, right? So I start off with saying that fear is a natural emotion and can be seen as a survival mechanism. As humans, when the emotion arises, we have a strong tendency to go with what we know and rely on instincts, habits, and self to pull us out of situations. But unfortunately, moving out of fear can cause us to rely on habits that push us further away from God. Already, we begin to see the ripple effects and the detriments of moving at our own pace and intentionally against the will of God in this text. The Israelites start off by stating exactly who it is that Moses is and has been to them. And yet, two verses later, we see a change of pace in their language to Aaron about what brought them, about what, or shall I say, who brought them up out of Egypt. And so, before moving on, I just want to highlight the part that I'm talking about. But it starts off by saying, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountains, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses," talk about the shade in that right there. This fellow, not the person that just like brought them out, their leader. They're like, "As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt," they're acknowledging that they know that he's the one that brought them out of Egypt. "We don't know what has happened to them." So immediately they're saying, "Listen, we've been down here, we wrestling. He's been up there too long. Make us some gods that we can go on and follow. We understand that he's brought us out of this thing, but we need someone that can go before us. We need someone that can lead us and carry us the rest of the way." And then going on in the next 2-3 verses, we see that they begin to change the pace and say that the iron cast is then the God that has brought them up out of Egypt. Okay, so any everybody good right now? Okay, cool. Um, then I go on and say, here we see fear.
You know,
Yes, yes.
impatience. And I think that's clearly what happens when things don't go according to our plan.
Yeah,
We become very impatient. So I just wanted to say that word because
that's so good.
I tend to have a patience problem. So as you were reading that, I was just kind of thinking about all the times when I have tried in my own way to hurry God,
Uh,
and we cannot hurry God.
hmm I
I
think that's
agree, Pastor Carla.
really good.
I literally just wrote as I'm taking notes. This already stresses the importance of waiting on God. So
Hmm.
you you don't get patient or you lose patience while God is doing what God has to do. It really can, I'm sure as Chris will walk us through, take you in a path that takes you way off of where God has for you to be.
Yeah, super good. I love both points, and as we go further down, you'll begin. I use the word to sum that up, and it's called still faith, and the importance of still faith, right? So we'll touch that, and I think that is a really pivotal point of what's going on right here. Is that they're moving because of fear, but it's too hasty. It's just too quick, and it's causing ripple effects that ultimately, of course, is not pleasing to God. And it goes way left further on in the text. Um, and so I say here we see fear beginning to weigh down on their faith. You see, fear can have you knowing the truth of a thing and still moving against it for the comfort of you. You know, because they weren't because they were wrestling, and they were unsettled, and they weren't as comfortable as they would have liked to be when Moses was president. They knew, because they acknowledged, they say, listen, like, as for the fellow that has brought us up out of Egypt, they know who he is. They're able to identify who he is, and yet they still go against it because of that unsettled, or I sum it up as fear, because of the fear of the unknown of what's going on right now. They're like, listen, he's been gone for this time, and we just need you to make us some gods that we can worship, that can go before us. We just need some type of leadership that can go before us, because the one that we have known thus far has been gone for too long for our liking, right? Not for too long, but it's for their liking. He's been gone because it's too long for them, right? Um, I go on to say, I believe it's important to note that Moses wasn't God. He was the chosen vessel of leadership, called to lead the Israelite people to the promised land. That's the setting right now. If we're setting it up, this is after the Israelites have been rescued from exile. Now they're in their phase of wilderness, and Moses is leading them to the promised land. And so he's going up to have a meeting with God, and they're not happy right now, right? Um, and yet, here we have them showing us a vivid picture of what it looks like when shortcuts cut us short. Um, listen, I was reading the text. I love the facial expressions. They're getting me through, right? I was literally reading the text, and I was just thinking, it's so interesting how they're asking for Aaron to create this iron cast, if you will, this false god, as a shortcut to go. They're like, listen, he's taking too long. How can I go around this? It kind of made me think about being on the highway, right? You're driving, and I've had this happen a lot of times. And Siri's telling me to go one way, but what I see ahead of me is a lot of traffic. I'm like, listen, there's too much going on. I really think if I just turn down this street, I think I remember, make a left and a right, I'll get there and end up in 40 more minutes of traffic. You know what I'm saying? Ended up in more delayed traffic. And I think this text illustrates that so beautifully. Here they are thinking they're doing one thing that's going to get them to a place or a point quicker. And really, as the text continues to go on, God's like, oh, okay, y'all, okay, y'all want to play with me. All right, cool. Okay, let's do it this way then. Let's do it the hard way. What is the saying? My mom used to say it all the time, and I'm kind of going blank, but it's like, what a hard head makes a soft behind. Is that right? So here we see the shortcut cutting them short and eventually making a soft behind for the people, right? So the question I ask is, do you only believe when you are in the presence of your leader? I think the text starts off with letting us know immediately their leader is not present. And immediately you just see, as Reverend Burnett said, like the impatience. It just kicks in, as Dr. Moore just said, and it's like immediately they're like, listen, we need something else, because clearly this isn't working for us. So that's the question I want to offer everybody. Do you only believe when you are in the presence of your leader? And I guess it's just something to wrestle with. I mean,
And Chris, I got a question for you. Wonder
yes.
outside of fear, what causes us to abandon, what has brought us thus far? It's like almost a knee-jerk response to crisis or panic. So as soon as we get into a certain predicament, we just abandon what has brought us out of Egypt. So in your perception, what causes us just to drop everything?
Well, yeah.
And to
I'm sorry.
to what's familiar and comfortable.
Yes. Um, as literally, I don't. We're gonna talk about it because it's coming up. I think that's a very pivotal point that you just brought up, Reverend Jones. What causes us to, when all else fails, go back to what we're familiar with? Um, briefly, I talk as we go further on about the mental condition of the Israelites, and what it looks like when the mental condition meets a crisis. You know what I'm saying? When you're bound in such a way, and then you're faced with a crisis, and you add fear in the midst of that, what does that expose? And I believe that truthfully, what this text is really helping me with understanding is that fear exposes faith in a lot of ways. You know, um, it's not to say that we won't ever be fearful and that we won't ever, go through things and that we won't ever have encounters where we're reluctant per se. But what it does let us know is how much do you really believe, and are you really holding on to a person, or are you holding on to God, the Creator? You know what I'm saying? Which is why the question is saying, if you take the leader out the equation, do you really believe? Or are you just comfortable because you have an actual physical presence? And I believe it's important to note with the Israelites in this text, for some odd years, for a long time, all they had known was false gods. They were serving Pharaoh. That's all they had known. You know what I'm saying? It's not that once upon a time they didn't know who God was, because the text lets us know, starting at chapter 1, they're God's chosen people. They cry out and God hears them, and then God sends Moses, right? But that takes a toll when all you know is bondage. It takes a toll on your mental state. So I think, to answer the question that you're asking, for some people, I think oftentimes it's important to have encounters with fear, because it gives us kind of a check in with where we are mentally. Like, how much do we really believe, and what are we really holding on to that's really being the vehicle for our faith. So I go on to say that people are constantly searching and seeking for something or someone to put their hope and trust in, because it is in fact hope and trust that fuels faith. So that just goes back to echo what Reverend Jones is saying, like the importance of hope and trust. And I can't even imagine. It's funny. The text doesn't even really say how long Moses was gone, but we're talking about Moses, y'all. you know, okay. If you read on Moses, and listen, when God wanted to talk with Moses, even when he was reluctant, that Moses was to drop everything and go see about him. Even when God was frustrated with him, even when God didn't like what was going on, Moses was like, "Listen, let me just go be in the presence." And so, I think if I can add color to the Israelites, I think their hope and their trust was questioned throughout this text. Um, I go on to say, may I suggest that in this text, that this text is presenting to us the pressures of overthinking prior to making a decision out of pure fear and anxiety. When you think too long on something, when you sit too long with something. I mean, sometimes it's good to be still and know, and we'll get to that. But it depends on what you're being still and knowing. What are you really sitting on? What's really fueling you? And yeah. So the question is, how many of us can admit that we sometimes move prematurely because we are operating from a place of fear? I'll be the first to say me. I can answer that. Yeah, yeah. Um,
Amen.
Amen. See, if I can just get one amen, thank you, Doc. Okay, so I think that question was important to raise, because I think in many ways I can only imagine, of course, because I wasn't there per se, but I have been in similar situations where the majority rules, right? And I can only imagine the echoes of the different people that may have not been too okay with the idea, but was like, listen, this is all we got, this is all we can see presently. Like the analogy I gave, when you're looking at traffic and you're literally sitting in it, and you're like, well, how is Siri keep saying this is the fastest route? You know what I'm saying? This can't be the fastest route. Maybe if I go left, maybe if I go right, and it's like, no, you probably should have just stayed right where you were. But let's continue. Um, I go on to say, what we turn to in moments of fear matters. Um, Going back to the definitive definition of fear, what we turn to in fear really does matter, because, to be honest, it in some ways can be an indication of what we're worshiping, of what we're serving, of who we're serving. If we talk about, the present, um, the elephant in the room, if we can, with the coronavirus and just so many things that are going on, it's not to not take the necessary precautions. It's not to not necessarily, be mindful and intentional with or attentive, shall I say, with what the news is saying, but are we going to worship the news per se? And by worshiping a thing, you can literally become so obsessed with something and not realize you're worshiping it, right?
Man,
Were you saying something, Reverend Burnett?
Yes, because I had an incident today with a very good friend, and I think it's worth sharing. And she has had these little conditions, and she has gone to like 4 or 5 doctors in the last two weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And everything she has had, every test has come back that shows absolutely nothing is
Wow.
wrong with her. But she still has maybe a twinge or something here. And so today, when you ask that last question, what do you do? Sometimes I think we have to call somebody else, or we go
Mm,
to God, but God also sends us other people that
that's
we can
good.
share with, and that that can encourage us. And because sometimes we just, that fear, I think, and I didn't say that, but I think sometimes we are so preoccupied with what we don't see that we can't even hear God. The doctor is saying you're fine. You know, we've done this, and this, and this, and this. Go home. There's nothing wrong. But because we don't feel that 100%, we just don't take that word, and we just, want it to. We want to still look at the negative versus all the good reports that we've heard. Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, yeah.
So this person called me today just looking for some counsel about, and I said, the Lord already gave it to you. He said you're fine. It's nothing, and I just don't know how we overcome that fear. Because again, that was fear. Even though she had a good report, even though she done what she could do to, take care of her physical self, it still just was not enough. I don't know.
Mm. And what do you do when what you know is not enough? Like that's such a good point um, to raise. What do you do when what you know is still not enough for you? And I think for me in situations like that, I've had to dig a little deeper and say, okay, what's really the pressing issue of this? Like, what's really um, the overarching or underlining per se thing that I'm really wrestling with this? And is it because I've kind of conditioned myself to believe that you know one answer isn't enough? Is it because I've really conditioned myself to believe that, like, there's always something? Like sometimes we get to that point where it's like, well, there's always something. When we're so tired, when we're so restless, when so much is going on, it's always something else, right? And so I think that's just something for a lot of us, even those that are viewing or watching, to really sit with at home and just think on and meditate on and just say, like, why is the answer not enough? Or the people that we're saying we trust, why is that not enough? um and I mean, there's many biblical characters in the Bible that we can look at that are very similar, that listen, I mean, let's just stick with Moses, y'all. From chapters 1 through 7 alone, he was like, God, I don't know why you picking me, I can't do it. He got to the point where he kept saying, I have faltering lips, God, I can't do it. And God's like, okay, well, I'm gonna send you Aaron. Well, God, I still can't do it. Aaron with you, like, what you mean you can't do it? To the point where God got so upset at one point, he was like, listen, I'm about to kill you. And then Moses' wife steps in and she's like, not my husband. Don't touch him. He's like, all right, now I'm gonna let him have this one moment. So I think we see throughout the Bible and just encounters like that's just something that we wrestle with. And I don't think one answer is the only answer to that, but just wanted to offer that as a response. But I asked a quick question that we can just move past and sit with it. It says, what or who are you turning to during this time of transition, not just within Wheat Street Baptist Church, but in the United States? You know, um, just what are we turning to in this time? And I think this is just a question that you'll see consistently occurring throughout this discussion. What are we turning to? What's the turning point? And then it'll build up to us discussing worship and the root word of it and all that stuff. So Exodus, we're gonna start with Exodus chapter 32, verses 2 through 6. Um, to refresh everyone's memory, this is just the point where Aaron asks them to take off the gold earrings. He says, take off the gold earrings of your wives, your sons, your daughters, bring them to me. Then he goes on to tell them, so all the people took off the earrings. Well, then it goes on to tell us that all people took off the earrings and they brought them to Aaron. And then he began to make the idol cast. Um, and then we'll get to 5 and 6 because those are pivotal points as well. So I say here that I think it's important to highlight that acting out of fear or reluctance can have many different ripple effects on the outcome of your situation. What you do today truly matters for where you go tomorrow. I thought this point was really blessed me when God and I was wrestling with it together, because it wasn't like they weren't told where they were going. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like they weren't told that they're being brought to this promised land. It wasn't like they already hadn't witnessed the sea being parted and then departing out of exile, all these things. I mean, so it just goes on to really, to me, echo that even when things are going good in our lives, sometimes we get to a place of not necessarily seeing or knowing an outcome of a thing, and it thus causing us to doubt even the good of what we're presently in. You know what I'm saying? You can be reaping, the harvest that God has promised you. You could be like so excited, so enamored, and then there could just be this ripple effect of doubt that can hit you, which is really what I believe the enemy attempts to do in a lot of ways, to get us to believe and perceive something one way, to act another way, to act against what we already are knowing. And I mean, if we really believe as believers that we are um, serving the true and living God, and that the word is literally the living word, that this is literally the living word, that literally, as Luke 1 verse 37 tells us, that no word from God will ever fail. And we believe these things, then we have to be cautious when doubt enters in, you know, because then you begin to perceive something, and once it begins to seek and really soak in, you start acting. And then it goes back to what I was saying. You begin to obsess and worship and not even realize it because it happens so gradually and so casually, right? So I wanted to paint the picture really quickly, and I said back in both chapter 6 and 7, as early as chapter 3, Moses tells God each time that he speaks with faltering lips and can't do what God is asking him to do alone. After the third time, which is shown in Exodus chapter 7, verses 30, God reminds and instructs Moses of his prophet Aaron. He says, you have a prophet Aaron that will assist you in freeing the Israelites and bringing them to the promised land. And I asked right here, I said, why don't we see Aaron stopping the people after they've requested to serve and worship another God? Like, why, it's Aaron, he's the leader, he's the prophet, he's supposed to be the mouthpiece of Moses. And yet, here he is, like, bring your earrings. Come on, bring the earrings, bring the gold, bring it on, bring it all. And we gonna melt this thing and we're gonna worship this false God. Somebody about to say something?
Well, I'm just saying he would listen to the people. He's supposed to be the brother of Moses, right, and the prophet, and he should have the same understanding that Moses had. Why are we so easy to persuade to build an idol that quickly after they had arrived and couldn't wait on Moses? So why is sometimes, as Carla said, we have a impatience problem, and but sometimes we just can't relay that vision to some of the people to keep them going in the right direction. For some reason, we'll influence easily. But I'm surprised as you are, and I don't have an answer to that. And I'll ask you why. Why you think?
Well, yeah, we're gonna dive into that. Listen, because let me tell y'all something.
Do you think Aaron was hating? Do you think he might have done a little? I'm just thinking. I've never had that thought before. But maybe this is my time to outshine my brother.
Well,
I'm just,
I
I
I
don't
would
think
like to.
that's, but I just thought, sometimes that was his opportunity to be the leader, and he took advantage of it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, So let's go because I don't have the answer now. Let's be clear about it. I don't have the answer, but I do have points I would like to offer up. Um, and I mean, y'all, this part I've been really wrestling with. I'm like, okay, it wasn't like one of them made the
Right.
cast. Aaron made it. I'm like, okay,
Right.
Aaron, the prophet, he made it,
Right.
right? But we're gonna, yeah, I'll see if you guys, can indulge in the revelation God gave me sitting with this. So I say that Aaron is dealing with an intense situation. We see people that have been complaining. They are frustrated, they are worried, they are scared, they are broken, and they are mentally bound despite their physical liberation, right? Not to mention, this is just my imagination of just how aggressive they probably were at that moment. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but y'all, if you keep reading this text, and I'm sure everyone has read it, we're talking a thousands of people, right? So much so that later on in the text, which we'll get to in part two, 3,000 died, right? That's a lot of people to have died, and there still be thousands more left. Can you imagine why Moses himself was so reluctant to really, engage in this task that God has asked him to do? How many Israelites like God's like, you're gonna free all of them? And most like, me? I can't do this alone. And now he has Aaron. But then well, God adds Aaron. But then I go on and I say, also that the text shows that there was no prior conversation between Aaron and Moses before Moses' departure to go, have this encounter with God, right? Um, and I go on to say that I wanted to remind you of chapter 6 and 7 earlier because God gives very specific instructions to Moses about how the structure between God, him, and Aaron will go. God tells Moses these words in Exodus 7. He says, Then the Lord said to Moses, See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of this country. So God is saying, I'm making you in the seat like God. He said, I ain't making you God, but I'm making you like God. Aaron will be your prophet, your mouthpiece. Meaning Aaron's going to, whatever I tell you to say, Aaron's going to say. So Aaron is saying to the people what you have instructed him to because you got the instructions from who? Me, right? So here we have Aaron in this text. They show no prior conversation, between him and Moses. It ain't like it says, Moses said to Aaron, watch over the people, whatever. If they come near you, do this. It's just like a sea of thousands of people coming to him like, listen, make make us a God to serve. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I can't even truly imagine the weight of that. I just can't imagine the weight of that. I honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, right? But what I can do is go back to the text. One thing I've learned is this: if it ain't in the chapter you in, go a little further back. Maybe 31, maybe 30, maybe 29, maybe 7, sometimes all the way back to 7, and read what the specific instructions are. And so as we go on, what I'm really echoing is that the message is important. The message is very important. The instructions are very important. These things are extremely important and pivotal when we are getting ready to move. You know, and I think that sometimes fear can really cloud our mind and our judgment. And now we're misstepping, even when we've been given the roadmap to where to go, right? Even when we've been given where it is we're going, what it is we're going to be doing. Fear has a really persuasive way of having us think that sometimes we aren't as close or as near, or we're more far off than we really are. So I say, you see, it's in times like this, like the ones the Israelites were experiencing, where we see that instructions matter in the moments of fear. God's previous messaging matters, right? Might I offer to you that this leadership style that we see demonstrated by Aaron and even Moses can help us, can help to give us language and examples that there is no perfect leadership. For we know even in our imperfectness that Romans 8 and 28 tells us that all things can work together for the good of those that love him. And so the point that I'm echoing and highlighting right here is that I think it really added an intense level of humanness, right? Well, for this particular passage, I think it really gave some great insight to just how human we are, even though we may be called, right? Um, not to give an excuse for Aaron, not to be Aaron's attorney, but just to simply highlight and echo that he was under some extreme pressure, here, and even in this we struggle and we wrestle as leaders as well. Even what's going on with the world, even what's going on in the present day-to-day society, we are still wrestling with how to be better disciples to our own congregations, to our own relatives, to our own siblings, to our own people. And so I know for me, it was a humbling moment to be like, well, let me not get too judgy. Because listen, I don't know if I would have been any better. You know what I'm saying? I may have been like, you know what, go bring the sandals too, bring the shirts. Listen, I don't know. I can't speak to that, but I just thought that reading Exodus 7 to everyone would really help people understand the instructions, that the structure of it was God, Moses, Aaron. And then the structure of it on earth was Moses, Aaron, Pharaoh, right? All right, so I feel like a preacher. I'm sweating, Lord. Lord, help me. Um, so,
Amen. Amen.
oh God. so, I went on to say that we just have to do our best to follow the instructions of the living Word of God, and I want it to be um, intentional and cautious in the wording of that we have to do our best, because we have to understand that we're not going to always make the perfect decisions. We're not always going to do the right things. That we too will wrestle with what the congregation is wrestling with, that we too will wrestle with what members are wrestling with, that we too will wrestle with these things. And so it was just a humbling moment for me, that particular part of the text, because I think it's something that I will continue to wrestle with. Aaron, what was going on? And even as you go on in the text, Moses says to Aaron too, like, did they get you too? Like, how did this happen? And Aaron's like, I just did what they asked. Um, so I go on to say that fear can grip, snare, or entangle even the best of us, both in leadership and as believers. Yet, whom shall we trust or turn to in these moments? Will we choose fear or future? Hashtag fear or future. Um, Moving on. This is what it looks like when you don't seek out God's voice, but instead move hastily or from a place of impulsiveness. The word says in Proverbs 28 and 25, to make rash, hasty decisions show that you are not trusting the Lord. But when you rely totally on God, you will still act carefully and prudently. And we're getting ready to transition really quickly into the still faith. So I'll just read this and then begin to ask you guys questions of what your thoughts are about this next part. But let me just echo what Proverbs 28 and 25 says again. To make rash, hasty decisions shows that you are not trusting the Lord. But when you rely totally on God, you will still act carefully and prudently. Let us begin to explore the importance of still faith, which involves waiting carefully and prudently, as Proverbs tells us, before moving hastily while in the extreme moments of fear or chaos. It is through the action of being still that we can truly begin to seek out exactly what it is that God is saying to us about what we are enduring and seeing throughout the experience. And right there, I begin to think, like, what is even God saying right now with what's going on in present day United States? Like, not what are we saying about it, but what is he saying about what we see? And I think the only way we can really get to that and even get close to it is by sitting still and trying to truly hear what God is saying. I think that it's important that although this text shows us a lot of do's, a lot of don'ts, it does show us a lot of do's as well. We see what impatience gets you as you go on, but we also can see the importance of being patient. We see what it looks like when you move hastily, but we also can see what it looks like when you stay still and truly get a good depiction of what it means to be still and know that he is God, right? Does anybody have any thoughts before I continue to move? Oh, everybody should head now.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's like there's no premium or appreciation for stillness anymore. I think we get caught up in the busyness of the whirlwind that we kind of, not necessarily value the importance of just sitting and being still and listening.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And something I forgot to say, that I want to say, because I like, y'all know me. I'm the type, when I'm reading the Bible, if it's a word that I don't know, I have to look it up. Okay, and for Proverbs to use carefully, the word prudently, in both the NIV and the Passion Translation, I said, God, what is prudent? You know, maybe some of my peers, I'm sure, Dr. Moore knows, the scholar, extraordinaire, even Reverend Burnett, Deacon Hodges, Chris didn't know, right? And it literally says in a way that shows care and thought for the future. Whew, blessed me, right? I said, well, just make it plain, God, like to really sit and have thought, not just, okay, the moment that I'm moving right now won't just affect me in the moment, but my future. And this is the importance of still faith and really sitting and really honing in and making sure, is God really telling me to move? Or is it just my impatience? Is it just me being frustrated? Is it just me being fearful of all that's going on? You know, like I said, I just would like to add color. Just imagine even being a person that believed, that went through the parting of the sea, and yet your siblings, your friends, your family, everyone's around you saying, we need to worship God. Even if you wrestle with it and you didn't agree with it, eventually, what does that look like when all these pressing majority, like the democratic, like voices are saying one solid thing in this moment, right? Because I don't believe, and the text also proves that everybody thought the same, because that's why some go on to pass and others live. And God said, "You the chosen people." But moving beyond the text, sorry. Um, in verse 3, we see the people's request. It says, "Come make us gods to worship," being orchestrated, by Aaron. What is so interesting about this is, although the Israelites are fearful of being lost without leadership, they still make a request to Aaron to do what they want with these newfound gods. So it's like, you want new leadership, but you're still talking to the old one. you know, you want change, but you're still doing the same thing. So in reality, is it really change you seek, or is it comfort? I think that's something that people should really think of in this time of fear, or in this time of this pandemic, or just in general in a season of that can be more like wilderness like, right? Is it really change that you're seeking, or is it comfort? And if it's comfort, it's not going to give you change. I can tell you that. It ain't giving you change. And
Man,
I ain't talking about dollars, okay? It ain't giving you change. So, um, isn't it funny how you can deliberately ponder a thing and still just get it wrong? And so that just goes back to the point that I'm just raising to you guys, is that it's just so interesting that they're telling them, like, in the irony of it all, right? Like, we want serve God, we want serve Moses. He's not here. Let us do what we've done to them, sacrifice and do all these burnt offerings to something else. It's like, what? Can you imagine? It's like, okay, I enjoy Publix brand, but let me just go to Walmart. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, what? Like, what's going on? Like, let me great value this thing. It's like, what's going on here, right? So I go on to say that you will always get it wrong when it becomes about flesh rather than faith. Verses 3 through 5, we can find Aaron instructing them to take off the earrings of the wives, the sons and the daughters. Um, this is a random fact, but I'm telling y'all, when I saw that men and the sons had earrings on, I said, well, okay, that was something that I loved. I'll never forget when we were in OT, and we were reading that text, and it said that men had earrings. I was like, for a long time, that's not something that I've always heard in the church. So, not just to throw out a difference of opinion, moving on, but this is something that stood out to me. They say the sons, the daughters, the wives had earrings, but and bring them to him so that he could create with their gold these false gods. We can skip that question. Even in fear and in the midst of confusion, they use what they already possess to create what it is that they felt would bring them the most comfort. May I offer to you, comfort isn't always the answer, Majority of the time, it's the distraction, right? So majority of the time, doing what you feel most comfortable in moments of fear is truly the distraction to the thing. Because a lot of the times, I'm sure many of us can testify when we had to endure that thing, we came out a lot stronger versus then sitting on the other side waiting on the storm. It's just like people who always talk about the rain. Eventually, if you continue to drive, you'll find yourself driving out of it. I've had many of moments like that, like, Lord, this about to be crazy. And it lasts all of maybe 5 minutes sometimes, right? Not saying that was the Israelites' case, 5 minutes. Not saying that, but just offering that as an example. Um, it's important to understand the power of what we carry and the choice we have to use it for either good or bad. What I love is that God shows us time and time again the ability and profound gift He has bestowed upon us to create. These earrings were materials just used in the wrong way, right? So even what they used, even the idea uh, of what Aaron brought to them to get what was on their person and to use it, but to use it to worship God in a false way, right? This is something that I think people could just sit with and think about, like, what is it that you're carrying that you could be potentially using in the wrong way in this season? What is something that God can really, really get the glory out of in your life um, if you just step beyond fear and just use it, with Him and for Him. And I asked that question, and I basically said, "What is in the season that God is calling us to, that we can create a space or outlet for good and sound worship?" And then I said, I think this is an important point to begin to quickly talk about worship. Worship being the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration for a deity, to show reverence and adoration for a deity, honor with religious rites. The worship word in Greek is doxa, which doxology. I just wanted to say that because that blessed me when I was like, oh, doxology, great. Dignity, glory, glorious. If you look up the word worship, you'll find out there's a noun form of the word, and it means excellence in character. So that's doxa. Exuvio, which is towards God, um, or towards parents, to respect, right? And then in my public worship class, there was something that my professor said that I thought was so profound. And he basically was talking about like how worship, the root word of it is worthy, right? Worthiness, right? And then the ship is to ascribe, right? So we're ascribing to what we deem worthy, right? So this goes back to the very initial thought when I was speaking to you all previously about the importance of understanding how fear can cause for us to ascribe to a thing, right? And to deem it worthy enough that we begin to worship it. And how easily that can happen to us even when we don't realize it. You know what I'm saying? We don't even realize that we're starting to weigh something way more heavier than God Himself, right? And the ripple effects, as I keep saying throughout the notes, that can cause and that it caused the Israelites in this moment itself. So we go on. Um, and we're talking, and it says, this is one of the many reasons why worship is so essential to building and strengthening our relationship with God throughout extreme moments of fear. The encounter experiences in the moments of worship helps to give us language to what He's saying and doing in our lives, right? So it's like worship in prayer, worship in song, worship in just conversation with God, going back to the definition of what it's saying, giving reverence to God, and understanding that, coupling worship with still faith, right? And really beginning to have an encounter with God where you begin to hear Him clearly. Like, if we really look at what's going on right now as moments or as a moment of solitude, I was talking with Dr. Moore. I just love saying Dr. Moore. I was talking with Dr. Moore about the end of the text in Luke, and how, Elizabeth, how it never says how she found out about what was going on with Zacharias, and he was mute by the time he got to her. But it says that for 5 months she sat in solitude, right? And came out of solitude knowing what to name the baby, knowing who gave her the baby, having a testimony, and then having the encounter with Mary where John the Baptist leaps. And so the importance of really just sitting in solitude, the importance of really seeing moments of chaos or moments of fear as moments to stay still in solitude and wrestle with that thing and really begin to come out on the other end with something.
Chris, that makes me think about Brother Todd asked the question earlier. He said, did Aaron even pray when the people came to him? And when you look back at the text, as soon as they came to him, he was already giving them instructions on what to do, and it was going in the
Yeah,
wrong direction. So I think
yeah,
that reinforces the point that before they even got to him, the question is really what were you doing, Aaron? Because even when
yeah,
Moses was gone, what were you doing in that time where you could have been spending time with God and hearing from God directly so that you could
yeah,
lead the people where you're supposed to go? So I think it really does reinforce the importance when you are, period, not just people who are in roles of leadership. But what do you guys think when it comes to just him, instead of praying, instead of him taking a moment, allowing that pressure to get to him? I think it really just goes along with what you're saying, but what do y'all think?
Oh, I agree. We just act too fast. I mean, he just felt like he had to do something. He wasn't, I don't know. And I think it's a part of our faith, you know. Of course, it was kind of new to him, and that fear that Chris talked about early on, and fear will make us make unwise decisions without thought. So, you all mentioned that the 3,000 people, he probably panicked. And in his panic, and that's what we do. We don't ask God, should I go to this school, or should I
mhm,
buy this car, or should I buy this house, or,
yeah,
you know, we don't ask God. We just see what we like and just get caught up in the moment and then just act without any
yeah,
regard for whether or not this is what we should be doing. So it was easier for him to go back, you know,
yeah,
and instead of just waiting and trusting. And that's basically, like you said, Chris, we can't be too hard on Brother Aaron because we find ourselves
Go
in those
inside.
same situations.
yeah. Anyone else? Okay.
No, I definitely agree. I think that was an important question that Todd and Joy brought up in regards to what was Aaron doing, and rather than wrestling with the discomfort and being okay with being uncomfortable,
Yeah,
spending time in prayer, listening to God, he just busy reacting.
yeah. It's funny because the next point says this. The text doesn't say that because as it goes on, because we got to wrap this up. I see the time. The text doesn't say that Aaron then told them, "These are your gods." After he made the god, he didn't say, "These are your gods." What it says is that they themselves say it. The Israelites say it, and then for me, I said, to be honest, I wonder if at this moment, Aaron at this moment began to see just how murky the decision he had made had been, because immediately what he does after that blows my mind, because I've never really realized this even to that moment. Was Aaron does the next little thing he does is he turns back to what he knows. He goes, "Let's make an altar in front of the calf, right? Let's make the altar in front of it." But then he says, and he announced that the next day will be the festival of the Lord. And so, this OT for me, right? The capital L, talking about the Lord, right? He's talking about God. Let's make a festival in front of the Lord. And I've said, could it be that the text is doing this so that we can know it was God whom Aaron was really getting the people to worship? Now, this is just a question that I offer without him even realizing, like, that he was going back to what he had known in his panic. Could it be like this? Because after he does this, then God responds, right? The next verse, well, maybe like two verses later, 7, God then responds and says to Moses, like, you need to go down and check on your people because they really tripping. Basically what he said. He's like, listen, now you need to go down there because something's going on. And then I also um say in the next point that I had to begin to check the placement of the object in the altar, right? Many looking at it probably like myself, you see, he put an altar before the God, right? But hear what I'm saying. He put an altar before He put the altar before the false gods, right? I say I believe that Aaron demonstrates here what it looks like when a leader takes the more, or what it can look like when a leader takes a more unconventional route when dealing with misguided and scared people. Now, again, this is just me offering these things, and I'm not his lawyer. I'm not his attorney. I'm just saying, in many ways, without him even realizing, he too could have been operating in fear, and yet in still doing what he had known and certain who he had known, because it talks so highly of Aaron and how much he really was after God's own heart. He really loved God. How he was such upright, a righteous man. This is what God is telling Moses, which is how he even got appointed to Moses. And yet, even in the midst of fear, even in the midst of this moment, he then turns back to what he knows, and he's like, "We're gonna do a festival for the Lord." And then it goes to say, then the people, they woke up that morning, they did the burnt offerings, they did all these things, they ate and slept and all this stuff, and then woke up and indulged in the revelry, or as I described earlier, as the Mardi Gras. Because when I looked up the word revelry, I said, "Oh, this is a Mardi Gras. This is what they're doing. They just having a grand old time." And God up there looking at them at the top of the mountain with Moses like, "Oh, they playing with me." Okay, got you, got you. And I said that Aaron doesn't just say to them, "I am doing this because of this." He just does it. The people then wake up the next morning and begin to do what it is that they've known as well. And I say that I believe as Christians and true believers of Christ, this part of the text helps us to see that when all else fails, turning back to what you know can be common. However, turning to the God that we serve is imperative, especially when fear is defining your season of separation or solitude. You see, it is in this decision that Aaron has made that he has further convinced me of the importance of pushing past the fear of what you know or what the majority is saying, but rather to do what we know is right, and that is to worship the Lord our God. But then I said on the flip side, you know, we also see how going back to what you've known can bring about your future detriment and demise. Let's not forget the history of the Israelites and just how long they were in bondage. Serving a false god was all they'd come to know for a long time as well. Even when being rescued, they too were returning back to what they'd become accustomed to. I can imagine that many wrestled with each other in regards to not knowing or wanting to serve the calf. But sadly, the majority ruled. And I said this, be careful, and not I said this is really what God said, truthfully. Be careful in this season of following the majority, right? With all that's going on with the world, with all that's going on right now, literally, if you turn on the news right now, we get off right now and just go on the news. Be careful of following the majority. Again, this is not me unctioning anyone to not be precautious and to just say go out there, just you know, and battle with Corona. Listen, because the word tells us that vengeance is here. So I'm not battling with Corona. Listen, the fight is fixed with God and Corona, not me. But what I'm saying is be careful with going and following the majority. Be careful with what that can result into, and how soon before you realize you too can be worshiping falsely, whether it be continuing to get really deep into these Facebook posts or deep into these conspiracy theories, deep into all these things. I mean, wrestle with the text, okay? Wrestle with the word, but don't be out here wrestling with the people, right? Wrestle with the word. And um, I just to close, I put that this is what still faith is. As previously stated, people are always searching and seeking out something or someone to ascribe to, something for someone to give reverence to. While wrestling with my thoughts on Aaron, I began to wonder, what are we showing them with our actions? Them being people that are watching us, the congregations, the members. What are we showing them with our actions? Who are we showing them that it is that we serve? I believe that, to you guys' points that you brought up about Aaron, you're right. What Joy said, that I believe she said a member said, it doesn't say that Aaron went to pray. It doesn't say that Aaron did anything with his actions outside of saying, "Give me the materials and let's make this gold." And I wonder if the narrative would have changed completely if Aaron too went into solitude and said, "Listen, I gotta go. I gotta go and hear what God is saying. I'm fearful too. It's a lot of y'all. Y'all may jump me. It may really go down in a circle, right? But I have to go and I have to sit and be still and really hear what it is that God is saying to me in this moment before I act. before I act, before I take your earrings, before I take your sandals, before I even hear your voice, what is the voice of the Lord saying to me? Because I believe that same creative mind that he used to melt that gold could have been the same creative mind that he could have used to melt their hearts to turn to God, right?
Yes, and I want to say that, Chris, because you're a great point. Sometimes we don't want to say no.
Mm,
And I think sometimes as men and women of God, we have to learn to say no. I just
that's
want to say
good.
it. We just have to learn to say no.
Honestly.
And it doesn't matter. It's not a popularity contest. We
Mm,
want to be popular. We want people to like us. We want to appease. And it's time out for that. And I think that lesson, what I heard tonight, was sometimes you just got to say no.
mm, yeah, yeah. That was really good. Honestly, that was like a mic drop moment. That was like drops mic, passes collection plate. That was really good. And somebody was and just closing it. Yeah, I echo the point that God states that the people have been quick to turn from Him, from all that He had commanded them to, and even references them as stiff-necked people, stubborn, um, and just the importance of really realizing like what is it that we may be holding on to, potentially that can be stiffening our necks. Um, I then go on to say that you see, I believe that fear exposes faith and or the lack thereof, and it's in this exposure that we either become convicted or corrupted. God uses the words. He says they have become corrupt, right? And back to the point, like I sincerely believe wholeheartedly that if the narrative could have been a little differently, and I don't think God wanted it to be differently. I think because this is what He wants us to realize the difference in conviction and corruption, and how if you really harden your heart, i.e., as he showed what happened with Pharaoh in the previous text, what that manifests into that you don't win. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, you're not gonna win, right? Um, and that's pretty much the end of the Bible study. The last question I would leave with, the last two questions I want to leave with people to wrestle with and not even to discuss, is what happens when a poor or malnourished mental condition meets a crisis.
Huh.
Um, could it be that in this season, God is pulling our attentions away from man, away from the leaders, and back to Him?
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, could it not be that in this corruption caused by us or by the Israelites, God is exposing in these moments the greatest need for Him,
Yeah.
that flesh nor fear could never fix the problem or desire, but can lead you to the one true and living God? And that's really just exploring that fear can ultimately create false worship.
Yeah.
Amen.
Man, outstanding. That was outstanding. You all give it up for this young preacher. You did such an outstanding job. Put your hands
Hey,
together.
can you hear me clapping, Chris?
Yes, I can hear you.
That we hear God clapping all the way from the corridors of heaven. You all do me a favor.
Hallelujah.
Please get online and like and share this powerful teaching. What a word in this season. Please make sure that you have the opportunity to share. I just wanted to thank Minister Christopher Jackson again for such a wonderful word. I definitely wanted to thank our co-moderators, Pastor Carla Burnett, the Dr. Joy Moore in the house,
Listen,
Deacon Hodges, and Trustee Jackson as well. They worked so hard to make sure that we could have a word on Wednesday. So if you could do me a favor, please like, share, and get the information out. And now I'm going to ask the good Dr. Joya Moore to take us to the throne of grace.
come on.
I just wanted to echo that sentiment, Chris. What a wonderful, on time, and appropriate word for this season, this very difficult season that we are all in, a season where even the strongest of us, when it comes to faith, can become fearful, and that we have to be mindful of all the distractions and all the different ways that we can idolize and create these idols in this season where God could be calling us to be still. So thank you for that word. And let's go to God. Let's go to God. God, we thank you for this powerful word, this on time word for this difficult season that we are in here in the United States, God. But we are so grateful, God, that we serve a God who is always in control. So, God, we will not be fearful, God. And in those moments where we may be nervous or concerned about what will happen, God, we will not act without taking a moment to be still, God, to spend time with you, God, to worship you, God, knowing that you are the only God that is worthy of our time and our praise, God. So we thank you for this word that has gone forth. We thank you for everyone that has heard it and will hear it, God. And we also thank you for the messenger, God. I pray that you fill him back up, give him back all the time that he spent, Lord, with you, trying to get a word from you, God, for your people, God. So I thank you for everyone who took the time to tune in, God. I thank you for all the leaders on this call who are determined, God, to work and to make sure that we do your will even in this difficult season, God. So we thank you for just another opportunity to be creative, to come before you, God, and to worship you, Lord God. Thank you for just an opportunity to be in your word, God. So I pray for everyone who is trying to figure out their life in this season as we work through these transitions, God. And I know that you'll be with us. Help us to be good stewards over what you have entrusted in us, God, and that we make sure that we are focused on you always.